Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
Thanksgiving had always been performative in our family, a kind of theater that played out every year like a high school drama production where everyone knew their lines and no one ever dared to improvise. The same floral tablecloth, the same stuffing that tasted like a dish sponge soaked in salt, the same weird tension that hung in the air like secondhand smoke. But this year, the production took a sharp turn, and I knew it the second my mother, Margaret Whitmore, stood up with her wine glass raised like a damn scepter and smiled that rehearsed, icy pageant smile of hers. To my real daughter, she said, and even now I swear I heard the air leave the room. The one I'm proud of. Her eyes flicked to Emily, sitting across from me like the perfect porcelain doll she'd always been, hair curled just right, teeth too white, with that hallmark smile that made you want to punch her and apologize for it in the same breath. Everyone laughed. That polite, panicked laugh people use when they hear something awful but don't want to deal with the fallout. My cousin Jason even muttered, "Yikes," into his cranberry sauce. I just took a sip of wine, slow and steady, letting the burn distract me from the sound of my heart crawling up my throat. Emily, for her part, beamed and tucked a piece of hair behind her ear like the toast was unexpected, as if she hadn't already won the damn role before audition started. My mother leaned over, touched Emily's hand, and said something about how proud she was of everything Emily had accomplished this year. How she'd stepped up when it mattered. Everyone nodded along like this wasn't an open slap across my face. I looked around the table at the faces I'd known since childhood, faces I'd laughed with, babysat, carpooled with. Nobody met my eyes. Nobody wanted to look at me because they knew what that toast meant. They knew it was a message, a memo sent out across green bean casseroles and gravy boats. Lena's out. Emily's in. Play nice. I don't remember much else after that. I think I smiled. I think I said something about the turkey being dry. I might have even helped clear the table like some kind of damn domestic servant, scraping off the last evidence of the evening like it hadn't gutted me from the inside out. And then I drove home, hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles cracked. That was 3 days ago. This morning, I was brushing my teeth when my phone rang with that shrill, institutional tone that screams, "Bad news." I spat foam into the sink and answered with my mouth still half full. "Lena Whitmore?" The voice on the other end asked, cheery and officious like a receptionist at a funeral home. "We're calling from Maple Creek Residential, regarding your mother, Margaret Whitmore." I straightened up, wiped my mouth with a towel that still smelled like Tide and last year's regret. "Yes," I said, already bracing for a fall. "I'm just calling to let you know that Margaret's emergency contact has been updated in our system," the woman said. "You're no longer listed. Emily Rains is now the primary contact. We were told not to contact you for any non-critical matters." I didn't say anything for a second, just stared at my reflection, toothpaste flecked across my chin like war paint. "Right," I said. "Of course. That makes sense." I hung up before she could tell me to have a nice day. There's something about being officially replaced that doesn't feel like rejection so much as erasure. Like I'd never been the daughter at all. Like my name was being scribbled out of family history, one line at a time, in permanent marker. I sat on my bed for what had to be over an hour, just staring at nothing, trying to piece together how we'd even gotten here. But the thing is, I know how we got here. I know exactly how we got here. My mother never liked me. She tolerated me, the way someone tolerates an itchy tag on the back of a new sweater. Emily, though, Emily was the dream daughter. The one with ambition and soft edges and a voice that didn't get loud when things were unfair. She showed up when my mother's hip gave out. She organized Margaret's medication. She played the part. And now she'd won. I could have let it go. I really could have. After all, what's one more slap from the woman who once told me my high school graduation dress made me look washed out and desperate? But then, as if summoned by some malevolent spirit, the mail slot clanked and echoed through the hallway like a loaded gun cocking back. I walked to the door, still in my robe, and bent down to pick up the lone envelope on the floor, long, cream-colored, thick paper. Legal-looking. The kind of envelope that carries weight before you even open it. My name typed neatly on the front. No return address. Inside was a document, cold, dense legalese that I had to read twice before the words started making sense. My mother had signed something. Something important. And it was dated a week ago. Before the toast. Before Thanksgiving. I looked at the bottom of the document, and there it was, her tight, looping signature, next to Emily's printed name. There was a notary stamp. And a line left intentionally blank where my name should have been. I didn't know what it was yet. Not entirely. But whatever it was, I had just been cut out. And I wasn't going to let that go. The paper felt thicker than normal, heavier somehow, like it carried not just ink but intention, the kind that cuts deeper than any words ever could. I stared at the heading for a long time, blinking as if the letters might rearrange themselves into something that made sense, something less final. Durable power of attorney for healthcare and financial decisions. The next line had Emily Rain's name, bolded and crisp, printed as the designated agent. Underneath, in all its bureaucratic glory, was the part that gutted me. All previous designations are hereby revoked. Just like that, with a single typed sentence, I was erased, not just from her will, not just from her care, but from her life. It was a clean surgical strike, precise and cold. It was dated the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, which meant that toast wasn't an impulsive jab over dinner wine. It was a rehearsed performance, delivered after the ink had dried. My mother had already made her choice and just used the holiday to announce it, like it was a company reorg and not a betrayal of blood. I folded the paper back up slowly, deliberately, like maybe if I moved gently enough, the meaning wouldn't stick. But it did. Every word clung to my skin like splinters. I sat there in the half-light of my living room, the silence pressing in so thick you could have carved it with a steak knife, and all I could think was, why now? Why her? Why cut me out completely? I hadn't been perfect. God knows I'd said things I regretted, especially during the years after Dad died. But I had been there, through the surgery, through the first fall, through the long nights when she couldn't sleep and needed someone to yell at. Emily showed up later, much later, after the hard work had already exhausted everyone else. She came in like some kind of hospice angel with her perfect nurse scrubs and fake empathy smile, and suddenly, she was the daughter of the year. I drove to Maple Creek the next day, gripping the steering wheel so tight I thought it might snap under my fingers. The place looked the same, beige walls, red brick entrance, flowers in plastic pots to simulate warmth. At the front desk, I gave my name and waited for recognition. The receptionist, a blonde woman with half-lidded eyes and a mug that said Caffeine Queen, blinked at me like I was a stranger. "Are you with Emily?" she asked. "No," I said. "I'm Lena, her daughter." "Oh," she said slowly, like she was running a search in her brain's archive and coming up short. "Emily's the one we usually see. She's so sweet. Brings Margaret her favorite yogurt. Peach, I think." That hit harder than it should have. I had once been the one who knew the yogurt flavor. I had driven across town because she only liked the brand that came in glass jars. Now, that little detail belonged to someone else. They let me up anyway, reluctantly. When I walked into her room, she was asleep in her chair, the kind of shallow, twitchy sleep that older people slip into between medications. Her gray hair had been brushed, her nails painted in that same pearly pink she always wore. Emily's handiwork, no doubt. There were fresh flowers on the table, lilies. My mother hated lilies. Said they smelled like funerals. I almost laughed. Almost. I sat down in the visitor's chair, unsure what I even came here to do. Confront her? Cry? Demand to know why she had handed over the keys to my entire family history to someone who didn't even share her blood? I looked around the room, and that's when I noticed the photos on the shelf. Every single one was of Emily and Margaret birthdays, beach trips, a picture of them at some awards dinner I hadn't even known happened. Not one picture of me. Not even from when I was a kid. I left without waking her. Something in me was boiling, a slow simmer that was about to turn into a full-blown eruption. And I wasn't going to let it spill out in front of the nurses or Emily or the staff who thought peach yogurt was love. That night, I did what anyone in 2025 does when they need answers. I started searching. Public records, court documents, social media posts. I even tried to get access to Margaret's bank statements, though the bank clerk looked at me like I had asked for nuclear codes. "You're not listed," she said with a shrug. "We can't release anything." "Not even to her daughter?" I asked. "Only to the legal agent on file," she said, pointing to a laminated sheet on the wall with laws printed in Comic Sans, like that would make them more comforting. So now Emily controlled everything. Her accounts, her care, her narrative. I opened my old photo album that night, the one from high school with the yellowing pages and the stickers peeling off. There was a picture in there from my junior year, me standing next to the red Civic I'd poured almost $800 into over 2 summers of dog walking and scrubbing floors at the diner. That car had been my world. I'd replaced the brakes, the tires, and even the radio. But when Emily got her license 2 years later, my mom handed her the keys like it had always been hers. "It makes more sense," she'd said. "Emily's more responsible. Never mind that I'd earned it. Never mind that Emily had totaled it 6 weeks later. $800, which is like 4 times what that car was even worth back then, flushed like it meant nothing." I don't think it was just the car. It was the principle. The pattern. Over and over again, I had been the warm-up act while Emily got the encore. At midnight, as I was scrolling through Emily's public Facebook photos, still no privacy settings, bless her ego, my phone lit up with a restricted number. I answered it without thinking, half hoping it was someone official calling with clarity. But it wasn't official. The voice on the line was low, male, and just shaky enough to feel real. "You should stop looking," it said. "You're not going to like what you find." Then the line went dead. I sat there, frozen, my thumb still hovering over the red call icon, listening to the dial tone. And that's when I knew something was really, really wrong. I wish I could say I took the warning seriously, that some primal instinct kicked in and told me to walk away, that I packed up my pride and pain and just moved on like the sensible person I pretended to be. But the truth is, when you've spent most of your life being the background noise in your own family story, even a whisper of truth feels like a spotlight, and I wasn't about to step out of it. The voicemail played in my head like a scratched record, over and over, haunting me in its simplicity. "You're not going to like what you find." He was right. I didn't like it. But I also wasn't going to stop digging, because once you realize the foundation of your whole life might have been built on a lie, there's no going back to pretending everything's solid. I started small. Bank records first, not the statements, because Emily had full access now and I couldn't touch them. But instead I started looking at property records, donation logs, anything public that could give me a breadcrumb. I found out Margaret had donated $10,000 to a foundation in Emily's name last spring. The Rains Education Trust. Sounded official. The foundation's website was just a landing page with stock photos and a contact form that didn't work. The IRS database said it was under review. It didn't take a genius to see the cracks forming. Then there were the small purchases, all seemingly harmless on the surface. Boutique spa visits, weekly floral arrangements, DoorDash orders that sure as hell weren't for the bland mush they served at Maple Creek. Emily had been ordering herself steak dinners and billing them to my mother's care account, hiding behind Margaret's name like it was a mask. I found receipts through a shared Amazon account I didn't even remember having access to, one Emily must have forgotten to update when she started playing Heiress. And that was when the real shift happened, not just in the story, but in me. I stopped being sad. I stopped being shocked. I started getting angry. Not the loud kind of angry, not the screaming in the parking lot kind, but the quiet, calculating kind. The kind that takes notes, collects screenshots, and waits patiently for a moment to strike. It was around that time I found the box. My mother kept it buried in the back of the closet in her old house, the one she rented out after moving into assisted care. I had a key, left over from when I still meant something. I let myself in under the excuse of retrieving sentimental items for her memory therapy, a lie so convincing I almost believed it myself. The box was marked Frank, my father's name, in her handwriting, the same spidery script that used to sign my permission slips and scrawl grocery lists on fridge notes. Inside were letters, old, yellowing envelopes addressed from him to her. Most of them were boring, filled with love and mundane updates from his trips when he worked long hauls in the late 90s. But one was different. One was written a month before he died. It started with, "I know we said we'd never talk about it, but I can't die with this on my chest." That was the line that stopped my breath cold in my lungs. He talked about Emily, not by name, but by implication. About a child we didn't go through the system for. About Margaret insisting it was the right thing to do, that it was what her cousin wanted, that it would be better this way. He never said adoption outright, but he danced close enough to the edge that it became obvious. Emily was brought into our home under the table, off the books, with no legal records that could trace where she really came from. I sat there on the floor of that old closet, surrounded by dust and mildew and the ghosts of who I used to be, and I realized something that hurt more than I expected. Not only had I been pushed aside, I had been pushed aside for someone who maybe wasn't even who she claimed to be. Someone who might have never even belonged. The confrontation didn't happen the way I imagined. I didn't storm into the care home waving letters and accusations like a woman on a mission. Instead, it happened in the parking lot, under the harsh glow of security lights, while I was walking to my car with a file folder clutched under my arm. Emily was already waiting by my driver's side door, arms crossed, the kind of smirk on her face that made you want to slap it clean off. "You've been snooping," she said, and it wasn't a question. "I've been finding," I said back, leveling my voice, keeping it steady. She stepped closer, her heels clicking against the concrete. "You think she ever loved you?" she asked, not even trying to soften the blow. "You were never enough for her. You know that. You were just what she got stuck with. I'm what she chose." The worst part? For a split second, I believed her. But only a split second. Because now I knew the truth, or at least a version of it, and I wasn't going to sit quietly in the wings while Emily took a bow for a performance that didn't belong to her. My revenge wasn't going to be loud. It wasn't going to be dramatic. It was going to be slow, surgical, and public. I went home and dug through every old VHS tape I could find. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, school plays. I digitized them all, then combed through the footage frame by frame. I found the one I needed, a Christmas from years ago, when Emily had just come to live with us. Margaret was holding her in her lap, and someone behind the camera, maybe my uncle, asked her how it felt to have 2 daughters now. Margaret laughed, waved her hand dismissively, and said, "Oh please, only one of them feels like mine." The camera panned over to me in that moment, standing off to the side in a sweater 2 sizes too big, eyes hollow. I clipped the video. I cleaned up the audio. I added captions for clarity. Then I uploaded it to a private Facebook group, Memories of Maple Creek, a group full of staff, former patients' families, and neighborhood folks who still thought Margaret Whitmore was a shining example of grace. Within an hour, it had over 50 comments. By morning, it would go viral. And I was just getting started. It took less than 48 hours for the fallout to begin, and I won't pretend I didn't sit there refreshing the comments section like a teenager watching a popularity contest unfold in real time. One minute, the group was posting syrupy throwbacks and scripture quotes in Margaret's honor, and the next, it was a minefield of people asking questions they should have asked years ago. A woman named Dolores, who once praised my mother's grace under pressure during her Bible study hosting days, commented, "This is upsetting." I always thought Lena was the troubled one. Maybe I was wrong. That comment alone was worth everything. By the end of the day, the family video had been shared to 3 other local groups, 2 church pages, and someone even uploaded it to TikTok with the caption, "She said what?" The internet has a special way of turning pain into popcorn, and while that fact should probably disturb me more than it does, I wasn't complaining. For the first time in a long damn time, the spotlight wasn't on my failures, it was on hers. Margaret, of course, hadn't figured it out right away. I mean, she barely knew how to check voicemail, let alone navigate the flaming wreckage of her reputation online. But Emily? Emily knew. The morning after the video went live, She messaged me from an unlisted number with nothing but the words, "You've crossed a line." I didn't reply. Some lines are meant to be crossed. Some are meant to be burned down entirely, with no way back across. It wasn't just social media that shifted. Her little community of enablers started backing away, like rats leaving a sinking yacht. The church stopped sending its weekly prayer team. The flowers from the garden club dried up. Even the donations that had been trickling in, money for Margaret's specialized care fund, suddenly ceased. One woman emailed me anonymously, claiming she donated $500 through Margaret's fundraiser link and never received a tax receipt. I replied with a screenshot of the bogus charity's fake website and a smiley face I deleted before sending, because some parts of me still play nice when they shouldn't. That's when I realized this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about truth, or at least my version of it, finally given legs. I started writing posts on local forums and community newsletters, anonymous at first. Stories about elder care abuse, about unchecked financial access, about how easy it is for a woman to build a legacy out of charisma and cruelty if she picks the right audience. I wrote carefully, never using names, just enough breadcrumbs for people to recognize the loaf they were chewing on. But you can't play chess with ghosts, and that's what Margaret had become, not dead, but hollowed out, performing the role of a victim with just enough conviction to sow doubt in the people who still wanted to believe in her. I visited the care home with flowers, smiling just enough for the nurses to think maybe we'd reconciled. I took selfies at her bedside, posted them with vague captions like, "Sometimes forgiveness starts with showing up," and waited for the public to soften. They did. People love a redemption arc, especially when it comes with pastel filters and just enough emotional distance to keep their hands clean. Emily, however, didn't play along. The next time we crossed paths at Maple Creek, she cornered me in the parking lot with the subtlety of a storm surge. Her mascara was smudged, her jaw tight, like she hadn't slept in days. "What are you doing?" she hissed, stepping so close I could smell her perfume, that same floral vanilla scent she used in high school when she first realized being sweet-smelling gave her power. "Just visiting our mother," I said, all syrup and steel. "She's not your mother anymore," Emily spat. "You gave that up a long time ago." I laughed loud and sharp, not because it was funny, but because it was tragic. "No, Emily. She gave me up. The only difference now is, she finally did it on paper." Her hand twitched like she wanted to slap me, but remembered there were cameras watching. Instead, she leaned in and whispered, "This was never about you. You're just pissed no one picked you." And with that, she turned and walked off, heels clicking like a metronome counting down to something worse. Inside, Margaret was sitting in her recliner, wearing a wool shawl even though the place was warm enough to melt skin. She looked smaller, faded, like someone had turned the contrast down on her entire existence. I sat across from her, pretending not to notice how her eyes drifted in and out of focus, how her lips moved when no sound came out. The nurses said she was declining. Memory, mostly. But something about it didn't sit right with me. Was she really slipping, or just slipping away from accountability? She blinked, looked at me, and said, "Have you seen my mother?" It took everything in me not to laugh or cry. "No," I said softly. "She's not here." A few days passed like that, quiet visits, staged pictures, more posts that danced the line between manipulation and mourning. I started sleeping again, which should have been a good sign, but I woke up every morning with the weight of something unfinished pressing against my chest like a warning. Then the package came. No return address. Just my name written in black Sharpie, in a handwriting I didn't recognize. I opened it slowly, cautiously, half expecting it to be some kind of threat. Inside was a single item, an old cassette tape, the kind you had to stick a pencil in to rewind. On the label, written in shaky cursive, were 5 words, "For Emily." Or whoever. I held it in my hands for a long time, longer than I probably needed to, because I knew, whatever was on that tape wasn't going to let anyone walk away clean. The cassette sat on my kitchen counter for a full day and a half before I finally worked up the nerve to play it, taunting me like a ticking bomb from a time when secrets were heavier and technology still felt like magic. I didn't even own a cassette player anymore, so I had to go to a thrift store on the other side of town, rummage through a bin of dusty electronics, and hand over $20 for a used Walkman that still had a sticker reading Jeremis. Hands off on the back in faded Sharpie. I didn't ask who Jeremy was or why he guarded his cassette player like it contained state secrets. Maybe it did. When I finally sat down in my living room with that little plastic machine, I felt like I was about to summon something ancient, like playing the tape would unlock a door that had been bolted shut for decades. I clicked it in, pushed the play button, and let Margaret's voice, cracked, dry, and strangely young, fill the room like smoke. It started with humming. Just soft humming, like she was testing if the recorder was even working. Then came her voice, low and wandering, the kind of voice people use when they talk to themselves at night, thinking no one else is listening. "Emily," she said first, clearly, and then followed with, or Lena, or whoever this ends up being. I don't know if this'll get to the right person. Doesn't really matter. One of you will hear it. One of you has to. She took a long pause, the tape crackling faintly in the silence, before continuing. I think I made some choices that people didn't understand. Maybe not even I understood them at the time. But I did what I thought was right, even when it wasn't kind. I sat motionless, hands clenched, knees pulled to my chest like I was bracing for impact. Then she said something that snapped my breath in half. I still remember the night she ran away. 15 years old. It was raining. I pretended not to notice she was gone until morning, but I sat on the porch the whole time, waiting. Just couldn't go after her. Didn't know how to. I froze. She was talking about me. Nobody knew about that night. I'd never told a soul, not even my therapist. I had packed a bag, climbed out the window, and walked to the park near the train tracks, planning to hitch a ride as far as my fear would let me. I ended up coming home before sunrise, soaked to the bone and invisible. I thought she hadn't noticed. I'd built a whole story around the idea that she hadn't cared enough to. Now here she was, decades later, confessing into a handheld recorder like it could wash the guilt off her skin. I saw too much of myself in her, she said next, voice barely above a whisper. That temper. That mouth. That goddamn stubbornness. She was me, all the parts one hated. And I thought if I just kept pushing her away, maybe it'd change her. Or save her. Or save me. I don't know anymore. I didn't know whether to cry or scream. Because in that moment, everything unraveled. The cold comments, the favoritism, the deliberate cruelty, it hadn't been about Emily at all. It had been about me. About who I was and who she couldn't be around without breaking open. My whole life, I thought I was unloved. Turns out, I was just too familiar. She rambled for a while after that, mixing up stories and names, slipping between reality and memory like she couldn't tell the difference anymore. At one point, she talked about a garden we never had. At another, she whispered, "I'm sorry," so many times it stopped sounding like words. When the tape clicked off, I sat in silence for a long time, the kind of silence that stretches so far you start to forget sound ever existed. I thought I'd feel vindicated or furious or, at the very least, numb. But what I felt was worse. I felt seen. And that was something I didn't know how to carry. The phone call came 2 days later, just before noon, when the sun was high and unforgiving. It was the same woman from Maple Creek, her voice softer this time, tinged with the cautious sympathy of someone trained to deliver bad news in the least damaging way possible. "Ms. Whitmore," she said, "I'm calling about your mother." I already knew. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, heavy and quiet. "She passed in her sleep last night," the woman continued. "We tried contacting Emily, but the number's been disconnected. You were listed as a previous emergency contact, so we weren't sure who else to call." Disconnected. Just like that. Emily had disappeared, pulled the plug on her role the second things stopped serving her. I shouldn't have been surprised, but the finality of it still hit like a closing door. The woman cleared her throat gently. "Would you like us to relist you? As her contact? For closure purposes or next steps?" I didn't answer right away. I looked out the window instead, watching the neighbor's dog bark at nothing, the world continuing like nothing had changed, like my mother hadn't just vanished from it. And then, without a word, I hung up. Because sometimes the only closure you get is the sound of silence after you decide not to pick up the pieces.